over the years, Genesis fans have been saying to me, when are you going to write your version of the story? And I retired in 2015, and I thought now is the time to do it while I can still remember some of it. So I got together with Chris Charlesworth, and we together recorded my stories, and he turned it into what became the first draft. The book covers my role in the early days of the band. So we're talking really the mid-60s to the mid-70s. But it is more than that, because I personally wanted it to be a memoir of my life and times, because the 60s or 70s particularly were fascinating times to live through. When I was discussing this with Chris Charlesworth, I said, how much of this book is me and how much is Genesis? And he said without a blink of an eye, he said it's 2/3 Genesis and 1/3 you. And that's pretty much how it's turned out to be. So the book, not only does it give my perspective on the early days of the band and the formation and the early days of writing Trespass and Nursery Crime, etc., and Supper's Ready and so on, but also the wider context of the time. In 1973, Genesis released their first live album, cunningly entitled Genesis Live, recorded at the Free Trade Hall in Manchester and the Debunking Hall in Leicester. And I had decided at that time to explore other areas in my life. And Mike Rutherford put it very well. He said, you know, I could see for you stretching ahead, it was album tour, as it was for them, but it was different for me. And there were other horizons that I wanted to explore. So they very kindly dedicated led a lot of people to believe that I had died. And it's actually, people say, well, why did you write the book? One of the reasons I wrote the book was to debunk the generally held belief that I had died in 1973. And I'm pleased to say, knock on wood, that I'm still here. Not everybody knows that I also went on to road manage Peter's early solo career. This was the second half of the 70s. And Peter used to do this thing during a song called Waiting for the Big One, where I would have it all prepared, and it's a slow blues, and there's a long guitar solo. And Peter would finish singing, grab the radio mic, come off the side of the stage where I'd be waiting, and we'd go out to the stage door into some dodgy back alley at the side of a theatre in Pittsburgh or wherever it was, run round the front, where I would have a guy from the promoter's office ready and waiting to let us in. And then we'd go up the stairs to the balcony, and just at the right moment the spots would pick him up and he'd start singing the next verse. What could possibly go wrong? And then we'd make our way back down, and before anyone knew what was happening, we were already halfway down the theatre and making our way back to the stage. And it always worked fine until one particular night. The front of the theatre had 2 rows of glass security doors, you know, the push bar type of door. The gap between them was quite wide, and there was the guy from the promoters waiting with the door open. Unfortunately, in coming forward to open the outer level of doors, he let the inner one shut. So we couldn't get into the theatre, and there was absolutely nothing to be done about it. We could hear the band playing. In fact, we got to the point where Peter had to start singing with his radio mic, and that the spot guys must have been going nuts because they couldn't see him. They couldn't, not unreasonably. Fortunately for us, 2 guys came out to go to the gents, possibly to enjoy a spliff together or whatever they were going to do, and they saw us, and there was Peter all in his black and white outfit, and gave us several double takes, and fortunately pushed the bar and let us in, and we ran in. We didn't do the balcony on that particular occasion, as you imagine. We just went straight down the front, back up onto the stage. I've always kept up with all the music that Genesis and Together and Apart have produced, because it's incredibly diverse. So it's quite an achievement. And while I didn't slavishly follow a lot of the later Genesis music, I think probably I was more leaning towards the work that Peter was doing. And I mean, Mike Rutherford once said, but very candidly, people said, why do you write long songs? And he said, well, short songs, actually, good short songs are very difficult to write. And they got better at it, and part of the reason why they did long songs is that they would all have these, what they referred to as bits, a little bit of a chord sequence, if it's a guitar thing, or Tony would have some chords on the keyboard and so on, and they would just build up the songs that way. Whereas later, especially Mike, he got good at writing pop songs, and I know he's a huge admirer of the Beatles and ABBA and these people who can write 3.5-minute really good pop songs, and they got better at it over the years, and of course they got enormously successful, both as a band and Phil on his own, and Peter and Steve too. So there's a lot to choose from. More recently, I've been incredibly lucky to collaborate musically with both Peter and Steve. With Peter on his album Us, the song Digging in the Dirt, I sang backing vocals, and with Steve from Genesis Revisited on Your Own Special Way. And it's really lovely to have had the opportunity, and I'm deeply grateful to them for giving that to me. The people beg for the great reunion, which personally I'm fairly doubtful is going to happen. But they're all out there, and no doubt at some point, even Peter will finish an album and go on tour again. But with that, I wouldn't hold your breath.